This is She Creates Business, a podcast for wedding pros. Your host, Kinsey Roberts, interviews incredible women in the wedding industry who are making their mark and creating success on their terms. Join the conversation.
Hello, and welcome to episode 188 of She Creates Business, a podcast for wedding pros. This is your host, Kinsey Roberts. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'm honored to welcome back my friend to the show, Leah Weinberg, who is the owner and creative director of ColourPop Events. This is a really fun episode for me because as of today, at the time of publishing this episode on April 6th, 2021, Leah is officially a published author, and we are talking all about the book that publishes today. It is called The Wedding Rollercoaster. We chat about that. And today's topic specifically was the impetus and the idea for her back in 2017 for even writing this book. We're talking about how understanding our clients' emotions can help us serve them better as their wedding vendors. And Leah is an absolute delight to talk to. She's done a ton of research on this topic. And I know we all just went through a year where we had a lot of client emotions and a lot of emotions within ourselves and other vendors. But what I like about this topic is that it transcends time. So yes, we all just went through 2020, but we know how interesting relationships get once we are talking about a wedding, right? We've all seen it. And Leah had this idea for this book, The Wedding Rollercoaster, back in 2017. So very much pre-COVID. And I think that is really, I think it's important to say that so that we recognize that it's not just those huge, crazy, unexpected international pandemic style events that will cause these kinds of emotions in our couples. But I really love to hear the studying that Leah did on this. And again, ways we can serve our couples and ways we can be empathetic and understand their emotions so that we can help guide them through the process, no matter what style of vendor we are. Let me tell you a little bit about Leah, and then we're going to get right to the show. Leah Weinberg is the owner and creative director of New York City-based wedding planning company ColourPop Events and author of the newly published book, The Wedding Rollercoaster. Celebrating 7 years of business, Leah continues to leverage the organization skills, calm communication style, and ability to multitask she initially developed as a commercial real estate lawyer in her previous career. Her colorful work and party planning tips have been published online and in print with Vogue, The New York Times, People, CNBC, Bravo, Martha Stewart, and The Knot, among others. Recently, Leah has been recognized as a 20 on the Rise winner by Honeybook and the Rising Tide Society, one of the 25 young event pros to watch by Special Events Magazine, and one of BizBash's top 500 event pros in the U.S. A wedding pro educator with The Knot and Wedding Wire since 2020, Leah travels throughout the country sharing insight with her peers regionally as well as at national conferences such as Alt Summit, NACE Experience, and the Special Event. If you did not hear Leah's episode, her first episode, where we talked about running a boutique planning agency on this podcast, I'm going to include it in the show notes, as well as every link she mentions here, including a free chapter of her book. So please find the show notes over at shecreatesbusinesspodcast.com. You can also DM me on Instagram for super easy access. I'm at shecreatesbusiness, and I'll make sure you get sent that link directly. But without further ado, let's talk to Leah Weinberg from ColourPop Events about her new book, The Wedding Rollercoaster, and how we can help our couples navigate their emotions through the planning process and beyond and serve them the best we can as their vendors. Here we go. Leah, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be back.
I'm excited to have you back. You guys, offline, I just used the F word. I'm that excited about having Leah back on the show, mainly for my own selfish reasons. We're talking all about understanding the emotional side of weddings. And we're going to talk about this more at the end, but I have to shout it out at the very beginning here because run off and go buy it right now. Leah, as this episode goes live, your new book is in the world.
And that is bananas.
My heart's kind of thumping. Like, I'm so excited and happy for you. How does it feel?
Oh, it's absolutely amazing. I mean, it's been a book that's been in progress. I mean, the conversation that sparked it all happened in 2017. So like, this has kind of been a long time coming for me.
That's right. It really has. And again, you guys, we're going to get into this. We're going to talk all about it. Leah's going to tell us everything here at the end of the show because we have a lot to cover today. But they can get it on Amazon right now. Yeah?
Yes, absolutely. Yep. It's
Tell
available
us what
in
it's called.
Kindle version and paperback. And the book is called The Wedding Rollercoaster.
The Wedding Rollercoaster. Get over there, get it on Amazon, you guys. Support Leah's book. You're going to love it, especially after this conversation today. If you haven't purchased it while I'm talking, you're going to go click buy right after this. I promise you that. So this is interesting because, sorry, let me back up. I'm forgetting my podcast host manners. Let me back up just a little bit. Leah, you've been on the show before, so we're not going to deep dive into everything. You guys, I'm going to include the link to her past episode here in the show notes. So if you want to get to know Leah a little bit more, also she has a crazy, amazing episode. She's so organized and so experienced, and I just loved that episode. We talked about like organization and finances and all of that, didn't we? I mean,
the type A stuff. Yeah.
All the type A stuff. We ran the gamut in that episode, and it was awesome. But I'm going to include that in the show notes. That's where you can really get to know Leah personally. We're not going to do that so much today because I want to get into a lot of these questions that I have for Leah. But super quick, tell us in about 2 minutes or less who you are and what you do in the industry, just so people who haven't listened to that episode have a good idea about where you're coming from, my friend.
Yes. So I am the owner and creative director of ColourPop Events, which is a wedding planning company based in New York City. Mm-hmm. Prior to starting my company, I was a commercial real estate attorney and actually practiced law for a little over a decade. And so, while I didn't enjoy a single minute of being a lawyer, I do owe a lot of I wouldn't be as good of a wedding planner today if I had not been through that experience as a lawyer. So.
Yeah. Yeah. On the outside, I think that the legal profession and lawyers, it seems so buttoned up. It seems so, and it is, right? It's buttoned up. It's serious. There's a lot of serious, heavy topics, and weddings are fun and happy and parties. And that's not true. But I think there's a lot of aspects of, speaking of people's emotions, my goodness, even if you're in corporate real estate, that sounds really boring, but there's a lot to be had there, right? These are big financial decisions. There's a lot of emotions involved.
Absolutely.
Sometimes there's a lot of people involved, just like a wedding.
Yes. Yeah. People look at the two professions and always say, oh, what a big jump. What a completely new career. And it's like, it's almost the exact same skill set, just in a different industry. It's kind of bizarre when you like really look at what I used to do and what I do now and how similar they are.
Yeah, how much they overlap. Yeah. We're talking today, you guys, I mentioned about understanding the emotional side of weddings to ensure a successful event. I am personally intrigued by this because I am an 8 on the Enneagram. And so people's emotions are not the first thing that I think about, for better or for worse. And I'm not generalizing all 8s, but that's me. And so I am very interested, Leah, in hearing what you have to say about this. You mentioned a few minutes ago that this conversation, which is really heavy featured in your book, started back in 2017. So why are you interested in this topic? Why do you think it's something that we should be focused on when we could focus on spreadsheets and all of that, which I know you do too? But why is this topic important? It seems a little bit more harder to grasp, right? It's not a physical thing.
It for sure is. And it's definitely something that not a lot of folks in the events industry focus on. And so that's why I kind of think that focusing on it and understanding and learning more about human behavior and the emotions and what our clients are experiencing is a way to really enhance your client service experience and offer just this level of service that a lot of people aren't. And so the whole story of how the book came about is in the book, obviously. But long story short, I was having a conversation with a client who was having an argument with her father, and I was able to just kind of observe the situation and understand that there was more going on than what it was that they were arguing about on the surface. And in offering her that advice, I just started looking at other experiences I've observed while wedding planning. So whether it was relationships with the couples and their families, or the couple and their wedding party members, stuff that would happen on the day of, guests behaving badly, which some really juicy stories about that in the book. But I was just looking at all of my experience and I realized, wow, it's so rich. There's just so much fascinating human behavior when it comes to weddings. And I always say, like, things get weird when you get engaged. And
Oh my
that's
God.
kind of a lighthearted way to put it, but it is 100% true. People act so strangely in the context of a wedding, and I wanted to understand it. And so I bought like psychology books and did research for this book and all that stuff to really be able to give words and attach names to what it is that we all experience and see.
Do you think that you mentioned that you purchased books, you were interested in the psychology aspect of it. You're not the first wedding pro that I've ever heard say that, that they're interested in that more psychological perspective, but you are probably the only one I've ever heard who wanted to dive deeper into the research, who's purchasing those psychology books, who's really trying to understand what's happening here. Do you think your background in the legal field has anything to do with that? Because that's, very academic, there's a lot of academia there. Do you think that has anything to do with it, or is that just personal interest?
I mean, me being a lawyer is related to my personality and, how I view the world and being nerdy and loving learning and books and all that stuff. So I wouldn't say that being a lawyer is what made me interested, but it's sort of like my personality type that made me want to be a lawyer and then made me explore this is what happened.
Yes. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of connection there. How do we identify those emotions that our clients are experiencing? You mentioned the bride who was having an argument with her dad. Things definitely get weird when you get engaged. People act crazy. I mean, I don't want to say crazy because that might feel offensive, but you know what I'm saying, guys. Please don't hear what I'm not saying. People do not behave like themselves.
Yeah.
How do we identify these emotions? What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, the first step is to observe and to sort of take a step back and look at things from a high level and just take a look at what is happening. And then the other part is the actual learning of what some of these different emotions are and being able to identify things that are happening. I mean, there's defense mechanisms, and defense mechanisms are things that people subconsciously employ to kind of protect themselves mentally and emotionally. And so once you've, for example, like read through what different defense mechanisms are, you'll see a situation, you'll be like, oh, they're projecting, or like, oh, they're in denial. And once you've learned kind of what the scope of different behavior is, then the idea is that by observing, you'll be able to kind of match these different concepts with the behavior you're seeing.
Mm-hmm. When you learn about those different concepts, what am I trying to ask here? Here's the thing. We can learn, right? We can learn about those concepts. We can read about them. We can understand when we're seeing them. And then my question is, then what?
Right. So putting it into practice.
Yes.
And that comes a lot with practicing empathy and having a true understanding of what your clients are going through. So, I mean, the reason that I obviously wrote this book for engaged couples, it speaks directly to them, but then vendors are able to read it and they're able to understand the client experience. And so, I'm not telling vendors that we need to step into the role of therapist or counselor. Right. But like, for example, if you're a caterer and you're having a tasting with a client or a prospective client, and during the times of tastings, like sometimes you're just sitting around a table for like 2 hours. So you're just talking at that point. And what happens if they talk about maybe an argument that they're having with a member of their wedding party, and you kind of say, oh, from my experience, this situation that you're talking about sounds a lot like this situation that happened in the past, and this is what was really going on. So maybe, just have a conversation with your bridesmaid and find out what's going on, because there might be something below the surface. And so once you can recognize what's happening, it's about getting in there with the client, offering them advice if it feels appropriate. And in some situations, it's not going to be advice that they need. It's just going to be somebody that they need to be in the situation with them. I mean, I had a couple who the bride got diagnosed with breast cancer in the middle of planning their wedding. And I would imagine for a lot of people, that situation, for a lot of wedding vendors, that situation could be really awkward and uncomfortable, and you don't know how or what to do in that situation. So you kind of run from it.
Mm-hmm.
And instead, I just, put myself in that situation with them and was like, I understand what you're going through. I'm here for you. I'm here to support you. I want to give you the space that you need. Like, let's take a time out. We don't have to make decisions about the wedding right now. And it's just really being there next to them and them letting them know that they have a partner in this journey with them.
Yeah. I like the example, you as a very high touch, high service wedding planner versus a caterer who is sitting down at a table doing a tasting. It's probably maybe the first time, perhaps the second time that they've seen the couple. The next time they're going to see them is at the wedding, right?
Yep.
And so I like that how you presented those two examples, because I think it is important, and correct me if I'm wrong. I think it is important, though, to discern the level of relationship you have with your client before you are trying to understand the emotional side of what they're going through. I like how you really discern that into two distinct examples.
Yeah. And another way to look at it, I obviously am friends with a ton of photographers and have talked to different photographers about their approach to working with their clients. And for some, it's a little bit more transactional. They do the requisite meeting, the initial consult, and then they meet with them maybe a month or so before the wedding, and then they show up on the wedding day. And it's a bit just more like kind of an arm's length relationship. And then there are other photographers who like to get into their couple's stories and get to know them and understand the family dynamics. And so the information that I'm trying to give to people is that no matter which camp you fall into, you can still interact with your clients in a new way and a more enhanced way that's still comfortable for you. So obviously, if you don't have a very close relationship with them or haven't really interacted too much, there's definitely levels of appropriateness for how you react and handle some situations. But I think either way, you can kind of take what it is that you already do and just make it better by being able to be there for your clients and truly understand what they're going through.
Absolutely. And I think in addition to that, especially we touched on this, you and I, just for a second, right before I hit record, which is, you started conceptualizing this back in 2017, well before 2020, right?
Yes.
The infamous year that shall not be named, but well before 2020, where, wow, if ever there was a year we were going through the emotional side of weddings, it was 2020. And so what's interesting to me when you say you can just kind of discern ways in which in whereby you can be there for your clients is that you may not have to offer anything, because as you mentioned, there are vendor relationships that are more transactional, and there is no judgment there. I mean, we certainly have couples, even as a venue, where it felt more transactional. Like it was done, they were happy, we got a great review, but then it was over, and then we have other couples who still DM us on Instagram,
right.
And we all do, right? But what's interesting is that I think by knowing these emotions, by understanding these emotions, by recognizing these patterns of behavior that you're talking about, even if we are not, quote, in a position to be there for our clients, there's really no, discussion to have from that point. I think it's also can just be a stress reliever to us as the vendor if we are understanding where people are coming from. We don't get so hyped up in our own garbage.
100%. Yeah, that's been a big point that I have raised with people, with vendors during COVID times. We're just going to call it COVID times.
Yeah. Let's call it
so
that.
During COVID times, and especially now, I mean, we are, when people were moving weddings or potentially canceling weddings, vendors were getting emails about getting refunds on non-refundable deposits, or, pushback on having to charge more when clients went another full year out from the wedding. And sometimes those communications were polite, and sometimes they were probably far less than polite. And in that context, when we can understand where our clients' emotions are coming from, we can take it less personally. So a great example going into, we're here in 2021. I'm starting to book clients for 2022. And one particular client had so many comments to my contract, like more than I've probably seen in almost the full 7.5 years that I've been in business. And normally, and this is probably left over from me being an attorney, I take it very personally when somebody wants to change my contract. Like it's a personal affront, even though it shouldn't be. I obviously need to work on that myself.
I'm with you.
But in that situation, I mentally handled it completely differently because I was like, this client has just watched for 12 months, however many people cancel their weddings, postpone their weddings, vendors go out of business, people, I don't want to use the word extorting, but some people charging a lot more money than actually is justified to reschedule dates. And so there's fear, new clients are afraid of what happened in 2020 and is still happening in 2021 happening to them. And so they're taking a lot more precautions and being more careful when it comes to contract negotiation. So me knowing that like this client was afraid and these comments were born out of that fear, that just made me have a completely different perspective and reaction to getting that amount of comments.
I'm cracking up at your contract because like, how dare you?
I mean, it really goes back to like me being an attorney and just, you send out a lease or you're negotiating a lease and it comes back and it's just like covered in red. And it's just like, oh, this is so obnoxious because
you're like,
sometimes
this is solid. We're done here.
Right. Like a lot of times when you're a lawyer, like people just make comments just to make comments and flex and make it show, how smart they are and how they can negotiate and stuff. So it's very much just like an immediate physical reaction from me left over from that, which again, I do need to work on. But at least now, like knowing why the comments are coming in the way that they are, or, and even in other situations, like for other vendors, if you're getting requests from clients to have smaller deposits, at first you might be people are probably annoyed at getting requests like that or getting, do you have any flexibility and maybe refunding if X, Y, and Z happens? Like, at this point, who isn't annoyed? We're all exhausted. So like, who isn't annoyed by getting those kinds of requests, but knowing why those requests are coming. And it's because clients are kind of afraid of and wanting to protect themselves. That should help us receive those kinds of requests a lot better.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, that's not to say that you have to honor all of those requests or comments. Yeah. And I know you don't think that, but it's not to say that so don't hear what she's not saying, you guys. I know Leah doesn't think you have to honor all of those comments or requests, but what happens is, they're hopefully, right, you get to a point where you don't have to like walk away from the computer and wait for a day because you're so just scratched by all of this. You can be like, oh, that's nice. I understand where they're coming from. The answer's still no, but, and so it kind of just gives you those tools in your toolbox, which I appreciate. And I love that you're digging into this. So you said something earlier about empathy, and there is a difference, and you're really big on this. There's a big difference between empathy and sympathy.
Yes.
And I want you to talk to us about that. And could you give us an example of how we can approach those two things so that we have a better client experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So the kind of simple definition of sympathy versus empathy is that sympathy is kind of like understanding what somebody's going through if they're going through a tough time, and empathy is actually feeling what they are feeling in that moment, in that tough time. And Brene Brown actually has a really great example and kind of a visual illustration. And so if you think about it, like let's say you have a client or a friend, that has fallen down a hole and you see them down there. And an empathetic response is going to be you actually getting down there into that hole with them, sitting next to them, letting them know, hey, I'm here for you. We are in this together. I'm here to help, do whatever I can to support. And it's like being there in that moment with them. And you're down in the hole too. So you can feel, what it's like to be down in the hole. And so a sympathetic response is, let's say, again, you've got the friend or client who's fallen down this hole, but you decide to stay above ground and you kind of poke your head over the opening where the hole is and you yell down to the person down there and you're like, hey, I'm so sorry this happened to you. This is awful. And then Brene Brown says that sympathetic statements are always qualified by, quote, but at least. So I'm so sorry you're down there, but at least you didn't break anything when you fell. Or I'm so sorry you're down there, but at least there you've got food and water with you, while you wait to get rescued or whatever. And so you can see in those two situations, it's very different when you just like visualize. Like in the one situation, you're still very much, you're above ground, you're at arm's length, and yep, you are doing the right thing by saying, oh, this is a terrible situation. I'm sorry you're there. But then the empathy, the empathetic response is you are in that hole with that person. And so you are experiencing what they're experiencing.
Do you think that there is a point, and I feel like I'm still thinking a bit about COVID times. Do you think there is a point where, or let me ask this in a different way. If we are someone who feels emotions really deeply, and we are, because I think there are different feelers, right? There's different empaths. There's people who feel emotions very deeply, almost like the same trauma is happening to them.
Yes.
And again, please don't take that offensively, you guys. I'm not saying that, something physical happening to a person, someone's like, oh, I totally get it. I'm saying that they're an empath. They feel very deeply. Whereas on my side of things, I don't feel uncomfortable saying I am more of a sympathetic person. I'm working constantly on being a more empathetic person. But for my friends who are very deeply empathetic, especially, I'll use COVID times as an example, they can get exhausted. And they can be so mentally and emotionally and physically drained because they're so empathic. Where do you draw the line as a professional in the wedding industry, do you think?
Yeah, it's really hard. And so I'm an empath, and two interesting kind of stories there. So like I was feeling what my clients were feeling. I was trying to take on their sort of stress and anxiety and sadness, like in middle of 2020 when everybody was postponing everything. And like, I remember I got on a call with one of my clients and the bride started crying and I started crying. Because I'm one of those people, like if somebody's in my environment crying, like I just can't help but not cry because I feel like I'm feeling what they're feeling. And so what was really interesting from all of that was I generally take the month of December off from my clients. Like I tell them, unless I have a wedding or something that month, but in general, it's like, I'm like, tell my clients, enjoy the holidays. Let's take the period from Thanksgiving to New Year's off, spend it with your families or your loved ones, whoever you so choose. And like, let's just not think about wedding planning. So in December, I'm generally not doing a ton, like on the ground planning for people. And I remember this year going from 2020 into 2021, I started feeling so much anxiety in my body as we approached, it's the Monday after New Year's Day is when I like reach out to all of my existing clients and like restart the conversation. And as that date got closer, I was just so anxious and nervous and kind of bummed out. And it was because my body was like, I can't go through what I just went through in April and May of 2020 again, in terms of like having the same conversations. Like, are we doing this? Are we postponing? Are we rescheduling? Are we canceling? A lot of couples, we decided like, let's even continue the pause for like another 2 months just to see how things are going. But yeah, like I was so exhausted and my body was just like physically afraid and not wanting to have these same conversations again. And so it's really hard. And I mean, there's books out there that empaths and highly sensitive people can read about drawing boundaries. And I think the most important thing that we have to just understand is that like, we can't take on our client stuff. I know some of us, it's a natural reaction to want to do that, but we have to draw the boundaries to kind of like keep ourselves from doing that, because we're just naturally going to be taking it on anyway and be more susceptible and more tired and exhausted from all that. So being conscious about putting up those walls and setting boundaries is really important.
And I think one of the things to come out of not even just 2020, but I feel like in the last couple of years where we're having a lot more conversations around mental health in the public, I think that it is becoming more okay. Not that it shouldn't have always been, right? But I think from a professional perspective, it is becoming more okay and more widely acknowledged and even respected. If you just say, hey, I need a bit of a break from this. Like, I don't think your clients would say, oh my gosh, you're the worst. I think if you just say, listen, this has been a lot. I'm here for you. I'm going to take a step back just for 48 hours because I need to kind of recharge or regroup or whatever. And then I'm going to get back with you. I actually feel that being so much more accepted now than maybe it was 5 years ago. I
sure. Yeah. And it's something that we all have to remember. I mean, they're humans too. And I think it makes us more human to them to be able to say, hey, I need a minute. And then they know that we will have that same grace for them if they need a minute, like if they're going through something. So they feel like it's a kind of give and take and mutual respect that we can all respect our own boundaries and what everybody's experiencing.
That's such a good point, Leah. I'm so glad you said that. It's the same with who I feel like probably Brene Brown says it too, but it's not just her. But it's the same. It's being vulnerable, and it's showing your vulnerability, not because it's a sign of weakness, but number one, it of course helps you have deeper relationships, but also because it gives people permission to be vulnerable around you.
Yes. Yeah. And I, until I started reading Brene Brown, was not very good at that because and I'll be honest, I always viewed my role as the wedding planner of like, I've got to be my client's rock. I've got to be there for them. I've got to be solid. I got to always have it together because they have to have trust and confidence in me. So I was always kind of questioning, again, like what you would put out on social media, what you would talk to them about when you were like privately having conversations and everything, because I was so afraid to be too vulnerable and show them too much that I wasn't perfect because I didn't want them to lose confidence in me. And that mindset has completely changed. And I also think like the climate for that has also changed too.
Yeah. Fair point. Well made. Talk to me about the meaning. Really, talk to me about the meaning of emotional intelligence, but also identifying your emotional style so that we can deepen that connection with clients. Now, this is what I am like very personally interested in. How do you even identify your emotional style? Because I want to connect with my clients. I really do. I'm not as deep involved as a venue owner, as a planner, or some of those more personalized photographers. But I think it's important to connect with our clients. And I know, like I said, I mentioned in the beginning, my personality doesn't naturally default to that. So what is emotional intelligence? How do we identify our own emotional styles?
Yeah, it's if you think about being book smart or street smart in terms of like an academic sense of intelligence, emotional intelligence and emotional styles, like whether you're kind of how street smart you are when it comes to emotions. So being able to understand your own emotions, navigate them, how self-aware you are, and then also being able to read other people and be cued into how they're feeling and whether you can sort of naturally comfort them or offer support in those moments. And so everybody's level of emotional intelligence and emotional style is going to vary. And so it's very much similar to just understanding your strengths and weaknesses in life, like what you're good at, what you're not good at. And if you normally kind of have that arm's length casual relationship with clients and you want to deepen it, it's about practice. So kind of figuring out those moments or even creating moments where you can kind of connect with them more. So whether it's, scheduling an additional tasting with clients in order to have an opportunity to sit down and get to know them more, or same thing, like if you're a venue that provides catering in-house, like creating moments for you just to talk and interact, and creating space potentially for them to just bring up things that are going on with them. And again, like it depends on where you're starting from as to how deep and connected and intense you want to go. But it is really about practice, like practicing connecting with people. And even in lower stakes conversations, like think about kind of starting it with friends. So if you're out to coffee, well, who knows what people can do with COVID, but like
wherever you are in the world.
Yes, wherever you are in the world, and like reading body language and stuff over Zoom is probably not a great place to start. But the next time you can have socially distant coffee with somebody, like sort of practice with a friend, like in a low stakes environment, like just practice kind of tuning into their behavior, their body language, making sure you're asking them questions to sort of understand how they're feeling, and also to be more of an active listener. So you can kind of practice in different contexts so that you can then sort of try to apply that within professional relationships.
That's so good. This is so good, Leah. I cannot wait to read this book. And I love that you wrote it for couples because it gives us as vendors, I feel like we're almost in on a secret by reading this book. You know what I mean? That's what it feels like. And so I would love for you to tell us about the Wedding Rollercoaster. Tell us everything.
Yeah. So it's for engaged couples to help them navigate the ups and downs of wedding planning with a strong focus on keeping and preserving healthy relationships during that process. And it's all the relationships involved. So the relationship with yourself, the relationship with your partner, with your family, with friends, with the wedding party, with your guests. It touches on all these different things. And we kind of go through the wedding planning journey chronologically. So figuring out, what you and your partner need to do at the very beginning to set yourself up for success, some of the emotions and things you might experience during the planning process, and then focusing on like your interactions with family, wedding party, and guests. And so vendors, particularly vendors that aren't planners, I think this is going to be really eye-opening because it just totally pulls back the curtain on the entire wedding planning process. Like if you're a photographer, you're going to get a glimpse at wedding budget conversations that you never could have imagined that people have to have about like, how much money are you giving me? And what do you expect in return for giving me this money? Like really upfront and candid and awkward and uncomfortable conversations.
Oh man, I am so thrilled for you. I'm not surprised that you've done this. But I'm absolutely thrilled. I cannot wait for everybody to get their hands on it. Again, my friends, as this episode airs, it is live. It is ready for you to purchase both in print and on Kindle on Amazon. I am putting a link in the show notes. If for some reason you cannot find your show notes, I know you can find Instagram. You just come on over to @SheCreatesBusiness and I will directly DM you the link and make it super easy for you. Support my friend Leah from ColourPop Events. Leah, I appreciate you and your time. Thank you for coming back on the show for this.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. I'm so happy to be chatting with you again.
Likewise. Take care of yourself, you guys. Thank you so much for listening and buy Leah's book. You're welcome. Bye, Leah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to She Creates Business. Please take a minute and head to iTunes to leave an honest review so we can help more wedding pros find the show.